Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are looking at a mystery that didn't just haunt a single generation. It literally rewired how an entire country thinks about safety. Okay, let's dive into this. We are tracing the timeline and the immense legacy of the vanishing that shocked America. This is a story about a dark crime, for sure, but more importantly, it's about the profound historical and social ripples that followed in its wake. Let's set the scene based on the historical record. Picture an ordinary, quiet morning in a New York City neighborhood. The city is bustling, families are rushing out the door to work, kids are walking to school, the usual routine, right? And right there, among them, was a 6-year-old boy named Eaton Potts. Now, what makes this specific morning so crucial is that Eaton was making this short journey, just to walk to a school bus stop completely alone for the very first time. His parents, like any of us sending a kid off to school, fully expected him to be bounding back through the door later that afternoon. But the afternoon came, the school bell rang, and Eaton never returned, leaving everyone with one agonizing, terrifying question. What happened to Eaton Potts? In an instant, a completely normal New York City morning just fractured into an absolute nightmare. It's this sudden tragedy that pulls us directly into the core mystery here. How does a child simply vanish into thin air on a short, familiar walk to the bus stop? As you can imagine, panic spread like wildfire, and the scale of the response? It was absolutely staggering. The community didn't just sit around waiting. Neighbors immediately hit the streets. They scoured local parks and systematically checked abandoned buildings. And alongside the community, there was a massive, unprecedented police mobilization. According to the records, police launched one of the absolute largest missing child investigations that New York City had ever seen up to that point. The sheer, monumental effort to find him was incredible. Yet despite that massive, frantic search, there was no clear evidence, not a single trace. There were absolutely zero witnesses who knew exactly what happened to little Eitan. Just silence. It is incredibly eerie to think about, isn't it? Investigators were completely baffled. You have literally one of the biggest police mobilizations in city history, and it yields absolutely nothing. This chilling lack of clues shifted the situation from an immediate, desperate emergency search right into what would become a notoriously prolonged cold case. Chapter 2, The Cultural Shift. Now that silence we just talked about, it didn't mean the story faded away. Actually, scratch that, the exact opposite happened. Days agonizingly dragged into weeks, and the media spotlight just kept growing. Eitan's face became unforgettable to millions of Americans through the milk carton campaign. Pictures of missing children began appearing right on the side of everyday milk cartons. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive cultural shift. It wasn't just a desperate search tactic anymore, it became the ultimate symbol of a growing nationwide push to find missing kids. Every single morning at the breakfast table, families across the country were looking at the faces of missing children, starting with Eitan. But despite that unprecedented level of public awareness, the investigation stalled. First, nationwide media broadcast Eitan's face everywhere. As a result, investigators tirelessly followed the countless leads generated by all that exposure. But the tragic reality, almost all of those leads led straight to dead ends. It's a deeply frustrating paradox, right? Public awareness was literally at an all-time high, yet the mystery remained completely unsolved for decades. Chapter 3, A Break After 33 Years. Let's move to and see how this builds, because imagine this. More than 3 full decades later, police finally reopened the investigation. If we look at the long road through the courts, it starts at day 1 with the disappearance. Then we jump an astounding 33 years to a suspect being questioned and eventually confessing. But the legal journey, it was far from over. It actually took until 2017 for a jury to finally convict the suspect after a retrial. And the legal process kept going long after that, with further appeals stretching all the way to 2026, when the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately reinstated the conviction. This legal battle was incredibly tense and deeply complicated. On one side, you had the prosecution moving forward by primarily relying on the suspect's lengthy confession. On the exact opposite side, the defense was intensely challenging the reliability of that very same confession. The tension between a decades-old confession and the defense's rigorous challenges to its validity, well, it sparked immense legal battles that completely defined the modern era of this case. Chapter 4, The Legacy. So, the crucial point is, even with a confession and a reinstated conviction, some mysteries leave lingering questions. But while the micro details of the case might still hold questions for some, the macro-level impact is absolutely undeniable. This single case fundamentally transformed America. It radically shifted how the United States responds to missing child cases, it dramatically influenced public awareness, and it permanently changed the investigative practices used by law enforcement. Plus, it sparked generational conversations on child safety. This wasn't just a news story, folks. It was a watershed event that literally rebuilt the entire nation's child safety infrastructure from the ground up. To really anchor the historical weight of everything we've looked at today, I want you to consider this stark truth from our source material. One child disappeared on an ordinary morning, but the impact of that case changed a nation forever. It is a devastating reality. The tragedy of Eton Potts is heartbreaking, for sure, but the lasting changes born from that specific tragedy have undoubtedly shaped the safety of countless children who came after him. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. What other hidden legacies from the past are actively shaping our safety today? Think about it. So much of the infrastructure, the awareness, and the protocols we totally take for granted right now were born out of specific, often tragic moments in history. I encourage you to keep questioning and keep learning about the hidden histories behind our modern world. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep exploring.